All right, click the links to join the channel. Check out the Subscribe Star, Odyssey, Bit Chute, various other channels. So the four horsemen of the apocalypse are this Star Wars Andor, which nobody is watching, and nobody is even watching the reviews on it. And I decided to do a review anyway. And She-Hulk, which I just saw, which I thought, oh God, that the last episode, it's horrible. Nothing will be worse than that last episode, number 9. And then I saw this, and I thought, oh, this is actually unwatchable. Like, if I wasn't going to talk about it, there's no way the average person would even get through this episode 6, I think. Absolutely horrible. Then there's Game of Thrones, which people actually seem to like, or House of the Dragons. And then, what's the other one? Rings of Power, which nobody likes. So 3 out of 4 of those shows are unwatchably bad. Out of the, the big shows that have got some name recognition that are coming out, are just, this has got to be the worst. Like Hollywood, the left wing, these people have kind of written themselves into a corner with going so woke that the motivations for the characters in the story universe don't make sense anymore, because everything has to be woke. It's just this endless checklist that has bent itself into this Gordian knot where it's not even logical anymore, and you just don't care about anyone involved. So nobody is watching Andor because I think it's about Israel or the patriarchy, or fair-skinned people are bad, or some mix of fair-skinned patriarchy Israelis are bad, or vaguely a mix of United Kingdom and Israel just being big assholes in general, which is fine or not, depending on your point of view. But I mean, the show is very clearly a show about an SJW's perspective on very much modern-day politics. I'm trying to say it's very clear that you're watching a show filmed what looks like mostly on a green screen. There's no willing suspension of disbelief. This isn't Star Wars. This isn't Disney. It's a show you're seeing on your screen that somebody went through a checklist to make. That's how bad it is, which is weird because it looks like they put some money into it. But again, none of it makes sense. It's one group of vaguely brownish and mixed people versus another group of brown and mixed people. But one is in Hugo Boss. But mostly you hope that it's going to be a case of mutually assured destruction, because you hate everyone in the show on both sides. It's hard to tell, other than the Hugo Boss illusion, which side is different than the other side. Whatever it is, it's not Star Wars. It's very clearly a Hollywood show. I mean, there's no suspension of disbelief. The viewer knows a casting call went out for a bunch of, I don't know, Mediterranean people with a few Africans in there for some reason. It's the weirdest show because there is no immersion in the show. There's no surprise at all. There's a scene where you see 2 fair guys in the Hugo Boss analogy or uniform metaphor. And then you see a pox in the background who's also in the same uniform. But you know that the fair ones are somehow going to be portrayed as worse than the pox one, who, as it turns out, is, of course, the voice of moral authority, because it's Hollywood. If you see two groups of people and one side is fair and one side is dark, fair is going to be evil and dark is going to be good, especially if it's red hair, blonde hair, and green or blue eyes. That is automatically going to be evil. None of this makes sense, and you'll hate everything and everyone in the show. Why would you care if one mixed group is fighting another mixed group? What are you fighting for? It feels like just one CivNat commercial zone fighting for another one, like I don't know, Google fighting Apple or something. It's like, yeah, people like foreign legions or, mercenaries. Yeah, people will fight for a paycheck for sure, but it doesn't mean that people want to watch people fight for a paycheck. This is just globalist propaganda, but it's not just super base Hugo Boss me saying this. This show sucks. They are ignoring fundamental human behavior and motivations. The usual globalist propaganda is that some ragtag band teams up to fight the military or the state that represents nationalism or the patriarchy or fascism or whatever nonsense is currently in vogue by the Tumblr crowd who writes this stuff. This is Star Wars, but there's a scene in She-Hulk where they break the fourth wall, go behind the scene, and look at the writers' room. You go, yeah, that's exactly what we thought the writers' room would look like. That's why the show sucks, because of who's writing it. It's the found family aspect of global homogenization. Cut off your roots, destroy your family tree. It's communism 101, but Disney actually woke themselves into a corner because both sides are a mixed group, because of the Hollywood casting woke checklist. It's not the Bechdel test is for chicks, the super bad girl, of course, is someone out of Aryan Central Casting. She's super blonde, white hair type of chick. Looks like, I mean, it's just so obvious. Gee, why don't you just give her an Austrian accent? Why, some beautiful blonde girl with cheekbones. It's so on the nose that it's touching your skull, as someone said in the comment section. This destroys the motivation when each side is fighting for a paycheck and they're indistinguishable from each other. Who cares? I hope they just delete each other. People are tribal. This conflict would reorganize along tribal lines. Neither side is fighting for anything that the viewer cares about. Why is every single group in the show a mixed group? None of this makes any sense. It makes sense if you're deep in a cocaine-fueled Hollywood echo chamber. Fair enough. This is some globalist fantasy, but it falls flat. What are they fighting for? The bad guys look exactly like the good guys. Well, if Google wins, then we're Team Google instead of Apple. Yeah, this election counts more. It's just wings of the same bird. I mean, the reason it falls so flat is because we're seeing the real thing outside our window today. Disney is trying to push this globalism, but people hate globalism because different tribes have different ways of life. Diversity isn't strength, it's endless conflict. Nothing works in Hollywood because nothing is working in these diverse Western New World Order countries because, effectively they're headed to civil war, which is why all this Disney stuff, all this Hollywood stuff doesn't make sense. Now you're seeing like it's very obvious. You're seeing a Hollywood fantasy view of the world, and then people are looking around at the real world, and it's not just the willing suspension of belief. You're like, that's a fantasy world. Yeah, but it's a fantasy world that is so. It's not just a different world set differently. It's that it's diametrically opposed, 180 degrees shifted from the real world that like the West is going through right now, where it feels like, oh, is this made by Big Brother? The government is making some show to gaslight you into thinking that some kind of globalist fantasy actually works. That's what it feels like. And no, Disney, I don't think Disney's tied into the government, but the people who are pulling the strings there at Disney or all these other NGOs are the same people who are pulling the strings everywhere else. It's they're all on the same page with globalism. So it feels like we're seeing government approved propaganda, even though if it's not officially sanctioned by the government, it's very much approved by Big Daddy government. Like some political commissars are writing episodes of Disney. Where this is unwatchable because of that aspect of it. It's like painful to watch because history is about to repeat itself, and you're going to see, if civil conflict, intra and inter, unfortunately, where there's no escape, there's no only suspension of disbelief with something like this. This is way, way too much. Where something like She-Hulk, at least there is an escape. It's stupid, it's feminist propaganda, and I think I'm going to talk about it next because it's stupid in its own way, but it's so sweet and refreshingly stupid compared to this. And don't get me wrong, it's stupid. It's still stupid. And so is House of the Dragons is stupid too. And when Rings of Power is, when I say it's like, how can it possibly be that these four big shows or the big shows that people are aware of, how can it possibly be that they're all this bad? Well, if you don't take it, you got to see it for yourself. You can go find it online, obviously, and just watch the latest episode in each one of those series. And even if you don't give a shit about pop culture, go watch the episodes because it's a facet of where the culture is now, where the world is now. It doesn't tell you anything bearing any relationship to anything real. except in the sense it tells you what these Hollywood puppet masters want to tell you. And I think that is important to know. It's important to know what the enemy is thinking, or what they want you to think they're thinking, where their logic is, what strings they're trying to pull. And yes, Disney and what's the other shows? Rings of Power's HBO, and yeah, those people are very much the enemy. None of these shows are about money. The motive is not financial, it's ideological. It's a religion to these people. And they're the worst people on earth. Everything they do is evil, and they're trying to say they have the moral high ground. Like, oh, if you don't like this diverse abortion of a show of globalist propaganda, you must be istophobic. Okay, well, sign me up for the istophobic side, because if they're the ones that are not writing this kind of Mary Sue level cancer, that the She-Hulk, if you want to start watching episode 9 of She-Hulk, that last episode where she breaks the fourth wall, and goes, oh, what about spoilers? There's no spoilers to any of this stuff. Are there spoilers to propaganda? I mean, if you've watched enough of this stuff long enough, you know the shape of water. I made this other video for Odyssey and Subscribestar, and it's like, you know what direction these things take, because propaganda can only go in so many pathways if it still has to achieve its goal of running to the water wheel and turning the turbine. There's only so many places for it to go. So, like, you know what you're going to see with all this stuff. It doesn't matter, all those 4 shows I mentioned, they're all doing the same. It's like, gee, it looks like you just went downtown LA and grabbed the first 50 people you saw to be your casting call. Like, everyone's just you went through and you checked all these boxes. Oddly enough, East Asians, Chinese, Japanese, Koreans are remarkably underrepresented in pretty much everything. Africans massively overrepresented, and then like vaguely Mediterranean people, but the East Asians seem to be kind of lacking on screen. I don't know why that is. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys all next episode.